Janet Joan Evanson Stewart.
And is there anything special or unusual about your name or the way that you were named?
Well, my parents wanted me just called Janet Stewart, and when the priest baptized me, he decided I better have a saint's name, so he tacked one in there quick.
He did? He threw Joan in?
He threw Joan.
Well, that was nice of him.
Uh-huh.
And when and where were you born?
I was born in St. Paul, Minnesota, January 13, 1928.
So it makes you
76.
Thank you. And can you help us out in regards to your brothers and your sisters and their names?
Sure. Ellen, who is the only one that's still alive, is 83.
Thanks.
And Marcia, and Dorothy, and Connie, and then came me, and then Bill, Barbara, Louis, and Dick.
So just 9 of you?
Just 9.
Just 9.
9 children.
Just 9.
Mm-hmm.
And what about your parents, Mom? And what were their names and where were they born?
My mother's name was Mabel Louise Peterson. Her mother's name was Murphy. That's where the Catholic part of our background comes from. Mm-hmm. She was born in Albert Lea. So was my father, whose name is Louis Arthur Evanson. He was also born in Albert Lea. He was born in 91, and my mother was born, 1891. And my mother was born in 1897.
And when did they die?
My father died 1950, and my mother died in 81.
And what were their occupations?
My father was a trained pharmacist, but found more money in sales. And my mother was a teacher.
How about your grandparents? Did you know them, and what can you tell me about them?
Yes. Ella Murphy Peterson was my mother's mother, and her father was William Christian Peterson. And he had been a agnostic all his life, and about 2 or 3 years before he died, he went up to the church and decided he was going to become a Catholic. And then he outprayed us all.
He did?
Yeah, he was always praying.
He was?
He was always praying. But it was the happiest day in my grandmother's life.
Is that right?
That's all she'd prayed for years. Because he hadn't even been baptized.
And then what can you tell me about your family farther back than your grandparents?
Oh, I didn't get my father's side.
Sorry, go ahead.
Right. My father was, mother's name was Hannah, and she died probably in childbirth with another brother that he would have had, George. And he had 2 maiden sisters, Clara and Addie. And his father, my grandfather's, that name was Henry.
The last name was Henry?
No,
Okay.
Peter, Evanson.
Okay.
That's the Evanson side.
And then how about, can you tell me any farther back in the family beyond the grandparents, your grandparents?
Not really. I could if I had my cheat sheet, but I don't really know too much. I know the Irish came from Boston. And I know my grandfather, Evanson, met his bride from Norway in New York.
And that really leads to my next question, which is, what is your ethnic origin and how has it affected your life?
Oh, well, I'm pretty much Scandinavian, quarter Irish, I guess.
Quarter Irish?
There's some German in there too, they tell me, and English, but mostly Scandinavian, Denmark and Norway.
And how has it affected your life in any way? Has Scandinavian or being Irish or any of that had a...
Well, certainly being Irish was the Catholic side of my life, which has always been there. The other is the Norwegians are not a very demonstrative group of people. In fact, when we lived in Pilgrim Village, there were the Bombs that lived by us.
Right.
And he was directly from Norway, and she would take the kids back over there for vacation so the grandparents could see them in Norway. And the grandmother wouldn't allow her to walk holding her own children's hands. You don't show any affection at all.
Is that right?
Uh-huh. I think it's loosened up a bit now, but that's the way it was then.
Is there anything else that you can share with me about your family history? It could be any unusual events or famous people.
Well, we lived in the same house from the time I was born until after my father died. It was a very nice house. It was 4 bedrooms and 2 baths, which is, most homes didn't have 2 baths at that time. And with 11 of us, it was a good thing. We were just a block from school, so walking to school was nothing. And we could come home for lunch every day, too. It was on the same block as the school. The school was on the same block as our house, only at the other end. I can't think of anything spectacular.
What about the newspaper clipping that I have of, I believe...
my great-grandfather, yes. His name was Peterson, too, of course. And he joined the Army and was in the Civil War. But he was about 15 or 16, and I guess he mostly did the band or the bugle work.
Mm-hmm.
And but he was I remember him quite well. He was an ornery man, my grandmother used to say. He couldn't stay with any of his other children, just my grandfather and her. And he had a picture taken by standing by his grave with his name on it, with his hat on. And he also was registered at the vet's home, but he didn't stay there. And they kept telling him he had to either leave, or stay. And of course he ignored them and did exactly as he pleased. And sold them coffee.
Sorry.
So he was working too.
Let's see. So now, Mom, I'd like you to think back to the earliest thing you can remember. How old were you, and what do you remember was going on at the time?
It was before kindergarten, but I must have been about, 3 or 4. And I remember my best friend, Cack McCarthy. Cack, C-A-C-K. She lived down the alley, 2 houses and up, and we'd go back and forth. And we didn't ring doorbells back then and let anybody know you were there. You called outside, so you'd call, Cack, come on out and play. That you didn't bother anybody then.
Right.
They would come out and play. And so we were fast buddies for years and years.
What else do you remember about the time before you went to school?
I remember one time sitting in the kitchen, all of us, and the door was closed going to the hall, and we were all sitting along that wall, and my mother was ironing and telling us stories.
What kind of story?
Oh, probably fairy tales and different things like that. I don't remember the stories at all.
You talked a little bit about your home. Can you tell exactly where you lived when you were little, and specifically what your house did look like?
Yes, I lived at 1822 Stanford Avenue. It's on the corner of Stanford and Fairview, and it was a white wood house with green shutters. It was a corner lot, had a big hedge around it, the back, so that nobody could see in. It was a deep hedge, and so there was privacy. Otherwise there would have been no privacy on the corner. And we had a triple garage, a big garage. And sleeping arrangements for all of us was my father and mother, and they're in their room with their bathroom, and then the rest of us had the other bathroom. And there were 2 sisters, Ellen and Marcia, in one bedroom, and the 3 boys, Bill, Lewis, and Dick, were in another bedroom, and then 4 of us, Dorothy, Connie, Barbara, and I, were in another bedroom. Oh, and I do remember I rocked the bed.
You did.
Every night. I could not go to sleep unless I got up on my knees and actually rocked the bed.
With 3 roommates.
Yes. And
How was the beds? Did you share a bed? Or
double beds.
There
Two
were
double
2 double
beds.
beds.
Uh-huh.
And who did you share with?
Barbara.
Oh.
And she used to scream, "Janet's rocking the bed." So one of my parents would come up and whack me on the behind. And so one year I gave it up for Lent.
Right.
And she said, "Won't you rock, please?"
That's great.
So she really liked it. She got used to it.
That's great. And that was in St. Paul, Minnesota.
St. Paul, Minnesota.
St. Paul. And did you go to school before elementary school, or was elementary school the beginning?
Just started. They did have kindergarten.
They did?
Had a nice big kindergarten with real nice tables, as I remember it, in 2 different rooms. So we did some things, played in some rooms, and then did some actual work or coloring or whatever we needed to do in the other room.
Well, where did you go to elementary school, and what year did you start?
Oh, I don't know when I started. You'll have to
Kind
add
of a trick
that.
question, huh?
I started when I was 5. Excuse me. And I started, the name of the school was Nativity School, and I went kindergarten through 8th grade. And that's where I stayed with all my friends. We all,
It was a Catholic school,
Catholic
obviously,
school.
being Nativity school.
and I would guess that we probably had 40 kids in a class.
Is that right?
Probably, if I can remember
And
that
how many
correctly.
classes in a grade?
We'd have at least 2.
You would.
Sometimes there'd be 2.5, you know.
Right.
It was a big school. And I can remember sitting in the classroom, excuse me, and watching them build the church. Because the church had been in the gymnasium, like it's often the case when they start a parish.
Right.
And then they were building the church when I was in grade school. And to watch those guys, you know, with the church go up right alongside your class window was really a temptation
To watch that.
watch that.
Well, Mom, I'd like you to think back to an incident in grade school which you remember well. What was going on?
I remember it very well. It's the one day, and it must have been a Saturday or a Sunday, we were up on the playgrounds because we used to go up there and play ball and stuff. And there were a number of us, and we all started to throw rocks at the windows, and we broke some. I was in the 8th grade, and we were supposed to have a class play, and everything was canceled. We, you know, I don't know who we thought we were. We stood out there in broad daylight throwing, you know, how that somebody wasn't going to find out what we had done. But I can remember the nun saying, "Why?" And I couldn't tell her. I didn't know why, except that everybody was doing it. And I think, if anything, it's taught me tolerance for kids when they do something wrong.
Right.
You know, they might not even know what if they were like me. I just did it, and I broke windows. And of course, I was severely punished at home and abroad.
How many other kids were there with you?
Well, there must have been 10 or 15
Is
of
that
us.
right? So a big group.
It was a dumb, destructive thing to do.
Well, what are some other vivid memories of your elementary school years?
Well, I remember First Communion and the white dress and the white veil. And I was always short, so I always got to be in the front row.
Right.
And that has its disadvantages along with its advantages. But I remember going to stations one time and got the giggles, and I thought the nuns were going to kill me.
Stations of the Cross.
Stations of the Cross,
Right.
and I couldn't stop laughing. I shook. I laughed so hard. And, you know.
What grade was this?
Probably 4th or 5th, you know. Just somebody had said something that just got me going. There were a couple of us that were just, we couldn't stop no matter how hard we tried. So, the poor nuns. We didn't have any lay teachers back then at all. It was all nuns. And they were the Sisters of St. Joseph. And before my time, but not too long before my time, the bishop had told the convent, St. Joseph order, he needed more teachers, and they told him that he'd have to wait till they got them thoroughly trained. It used to be they sent the nuns out without any training to teach and
Sure.
nurse and do anything. They got to be the best teachers and the best nurses, but with no formal training in the background. And the bishop was horrified that the nuns wouldn't do what he told them to do, but they stuck to their guns and they educated them first. They got their degree before they taught.
Well, how were your grades in grammar school?
Oh, don't tell your kids.
This is for them, so.
I got an occasional A. I got an occasional
Good.
A.
Well, that's a good way to put it.
But most of the time I got B's and C's, and I was very happy with that.
Did you apply yourself hard at school?
No.
You didn't.
I had to in spelling. I still can't spell. And so I'd memorize. And if I had a list of words, I could memorize them and take the test the next day and get an A. But if she gave us a test 2 days after that, I didn't know them again.
Well, how did you spend your summers during grade school?
Well, some of the time we spent in Albert Lea with my grandparents.
And can you give me a direction in regards to distance-wise, Albert Lea?
Albert Lea is about 90 miles south of St. Paul.
Okay.
Oh, I do remember was when I was down there. Usually 2 of us went down at a time, and we pretty much did nothing except what we wanted to do. And we always helped with dishes. But it was supposed to be a vacation from all chores and all activities that we didn't want to do. So we slept upstairs in this house on a screened-in porch, which was wonderful. And you could hear the trains. And I still, to this day, when I hear a train, it's a nice memory.
Did you have any pets when you were little?
We did, not real little, except for cats. We used to have cats quite often, different cats. And one of them, Marcia, taught to play hide and go seek. And Marcia would get up on top of the piano. It was an upright piano.
Right.
And the cat couldn't find her. And just about went crazy looking for Marcia. And of course, we all sit there and laugh.
That's funny.
I know.
That's really.
And then when we got a little bit older, we had a dog. I think it was a stray that our parents finally said we could keep. And a furnace man came to our house, and it was in winter. And the dog barked at him, and he hit him with a brush, a steel brush, right across the side of his face. And so a neighbor, friend of mine, and I took him to the vet, and the vet said we should put him to sleep. So that company bought us a dog, and that's when we got our German Shepherd puppy.
Is that right?
Uh-huh. And Spike, and he was our true pet.
He was.
Spike, yeah. Yeah.
Well, while you were growing up, did you have any sense of whether your family was rich or poor? And what would you say now about your family's economic circumstances when you were growing up?
Well, see, I'm part of that depression part. And we were fortunate in that my father always had a job, and we had enough money to feed us and take care of us. And we lived in a nice house, but I knew we weren't wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember I wouldn't dream asking for a lot of stuff because I just knew there wasn't that much money around. We only went out for dinner as a family a couple times a year because only 2 families would have us. Friends.
And families would. So when you say going out to dinner, going out over to somebody else's
Somebody else's house to eat.
Because 11 people.
11 people. Nobody wanted to take on that chore. But we used to have Thanksgiving at a friend's house in Minneapolis. And my older sisters would go over there and help get ready for Thanksgiving dinner. And then we'd all come later and eat turkey.
Were you happy as a young child?
Yes, I was fortunate in that I was in the middle. And where Ellen had to break my parents in, and the youngest ones got some attention, I could kind of just do pretty much what I wanted to do, providing I didn't get in any trouble. And I didn't get into trouble, except the time I threw stones.
That's what I was about to say, except the rocks in the window.
Yeah.
Well, what would you say about your relationship with your parents?
I really don't know, probably didn't know them well at all. It wasn't a negative. It's not a negative feeling I have, but it's not a warm, cozy either.
And is that the Norwegian influence, you think, again,
Probably.
or just the sheer number of kids?
No,
or?
I think it's more. I think it's more the Norwegian influence. I wasn't aware that it was so that way until I went to a "I'm okay, you're okay" weekend, and the psychiatrist ran this, and I went on a night on a weekend. It was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, when there were mostly ministers, and many of them Lutheran ministers from Norway, and they would talk about these things, and I'd think, oh, well, that's why. Oh, that's why. I learned more listening to them, plus what they taught me. I was a rescuer, and he was trying to get me out of that role.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Don't answer that question, he'd scream at me when somebody had asked me a question. Okay, do I answer this one now that you asked it? You know? But I listened to them talk about how formal everything was in their family. Like my mother was never mom, she was mother. But my dad was daddy. Mm-hmm.
Moving to high school years, where and in what years did you go to high school? And where did you live during this period of time?
We still lived in the same house on Stanford, and it was walking distance, a good walk, probably 12 blocks to school. We went to a private school, girls' school, that was a preparatory school to the College of St. Catherine's. And after my oldest sister Ellen had graduated from grade school, my mother was not going to ask my father, who was not a Catholic, to pay for any more education. And so Ellen went into the public school system, and my father went to a dance and saw boys and girls dancing and took her out, put her into an all-girls school. And my mother said it was nothing more than what they do over there, but if that's what he wanted to do, that was fine. So he went over and did some kind of a deal with the nuns, and they got all of us. It was 100 students, about 110 students in the whole school.
And what was the name of it again?
Durham Hall.
Durham Hall?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And those were 4 good years. Met some new friends there, but I still had many of the same people. Some of the same people that went through the 9 years at Nativity went to Durham too. So some of those came along too.
Mom, look back to an incident in high school, which you remember well.
Oh, this is humiliating. I was always a class officer. Freshman, I was vice president. Sophomore, junior, I was treasurer. And when they got the books after my junior year, they laughed. The nuns laughed so hard. They told my mother, I spelled paid, P-A-I-D-E-D, all the way through. Now the figures were perfect,
right.
most accurate,
So
but I sure couldn't spell. And but we had a lot of fun. We had sororities in high school, and we had dances.
Did sororities in high school?
Uh-huh.
That's interesting.
Uh-huh. I belonged to Gamma Phi Gamma. There were a number of different ones, 3 or 4 different ones, and it was cliquish, as you can imagine, with that many, with a bunch of girls.
Sure. Well, how were your grades in high school, and did you graduate?
I did graduate, but I worked hard. I worked hard particularly at math, and I loved geometry. Didn't take any chemistry, which I should have, but I didn't. I found out later. Because of my major, chemistry ended up being a minor in college. And I couldn't tell you anything about chemistry today. One teacher we had in college, and I know I'm jumping the game, all you ever saw was the back of his head, because he kept putting formulas on the board. And I go,
right.
Oof. So, but we had many we had parties and swimming. See, at the College of St. Catherine's, they had bowling alleys and swimming pools, and they had a whole building bigger than about the size of St. George Church. That was the health building where you played basketball and you played field hockey was my favorite sport. And we knew every sport. We learned every game, even football games, how to score, where the lines were, how to do this. It was part of our testing. We had to get all those games down, have all the rules and how to score them. And so I liked the physical part of it. I swam a lot in high school. I was a dolphin, and we put on water shows. And I learned to dive, and my sisters made me promise I would never do that again.
Why is that?
Because they had to come watch.
So funny. You talked a little bit about it, but what social group did you belong to in high school, and what kind of kids did you associate with?
I don't know how to explain.
Well, maybe this would be a better one. Who were your best friends during high school, and are you still in contact with any of them?
Yes, I am. Meme is one I'm still in contact with. There was another girl that I was very good friends with. Her name was Anne, and she died a number of years ago. She was a diabetic and died a number of years ago. But yes, I still see these people, and when I go to St. Paul, I went back for a reunion, a grade school reunion, a number of years ago, probably about 10 years ago now. And it was great. The girls I could recognize right off the bat, but those guys without hair sure looked funny to me. Most of them were bald, and I couldn't tell who they were, you know. So, but that was a great reunion, and yes, still send Christmas cards to some of them. Sheila Spriggs and Barbara Dion and Marianne Olson and I were buddies, and we used to go to the lake and get a cabin for a week, and usually Marcia was our chaperone.
It was kind of a scam, wasn't it?
It was a scam because the boys came, of course. We told them where we were. The parents surprised us and stopped in once in a while.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, who was the first boy that you ever seriously kissed? How old were you, and what were the circumstances?
Okay, well, he was my first love. And it was in grade school. Was the first kiss. And I had my eye on him from the very beginning. And he gave me his Boy Scout pin. And then one night, late after dinner, he came in the house the back way. This was after the 8th grade, and told me he was going to become a priest. And he entered the priesthood.
In 8th grade.
He went
He
in
knew that.
pre-seminary.
Wow.
He has since, however, come out of the he became a priest, but he left the priesthood and didn't leave the Catholic Church, but left the priesthood. And I saw him at the school reunion, and we gave each other a big hug, and he said, "I've been wanting to do this all my life." So
What was his name again?
George Moodry.
George Moodry? That's a great story. Well, did you attend your senior prom? And
I
if so,
did.
who was your date, and what was it like?
It was junior and senior prom. The junior prom was more fun because you put it on. The juniors put it on for the seniors.
Okay.
And you decorate the gym and you do all this stuff. And at that time I didn't have a steady, but I remember having a good date and a nice time. And we danced, and then we'd go eat and over to Minneapolis always to eat, no matter.
You go eat at a restaurant? Or?
Oh yeah. Minneapolis had more restaurants and better stuff to eat, so we always headed for Minneapolis, which the parents would not always like because it was slippery and slidey lots of those times.
Right. Well, if you could have changed one thing about your high school years, what would it have been?
I guess I would have been kinder to some of the kids. I was a snob without realizing it or looking at it now. If you weren't a part of our group, I'd go away.
Right.
which isn't a, I would change that.
Well, what was going on in your family while you were in high school?
Well, my older sisters, the war was going on.
Okay.
Okay. And World War II had started, and I started to tell you this about Albert Lee because I was there when World War II, when Germany first took over Poland, and heard it on the news and the invasion, and that's all I could hear. And I remember coming back in the car on the way back, wondering if they'd gotten to St. Paul yet.
Is that right? Wow. Sure.
I had no idea where these countries were
Right.
that they were talking about. And, you know, it was constantly on the news because it had just been 20 years since the last war. And my father had been in World War I. And where I didn't know, none of my age went into World War II, many of my older sisters. Marcia's had a Dick Daly was his name. And I think they would have gotten married if he had returned, but he was in that paratrooper first jump in Normandy. Was killed that day.
Well, what were your family vacations like?
Well, we didn't go any place as a family.
About to say, 11 people.
We went to the lake occasionally and had
what lake
picnics.
is that?
Lake Nokomis in Minneapolis. And had picnics, but my father would want to go early and get home before the crowd. So as we got older, we hated those because you had to get up so early. And but we did. We'd go and have picnics a couple times during the summer, and then for those of us that could, when we went to Albert Lee, that was our vacation.
How would you sum up your childhood and adolescence?
I certainly was taken care of. Probably not guided very much. Probably not at all. I can remember my mother even coming after the junior prom and saying that the nuns had asked that the kids not stay out all night, the parents to work with that. And, 2 o'clock was plenty late enough to be out. And so my mother came and asked me if I'd please be home by 2.
Wait till some of your daughters hear about this.
And my father said every time I got a job, I got more independent.
Is that right?
When I was in college, I went to Glacier Park, Montana, and worked. And the first year, I went late because he'd had his first heart attack, and we weren't sure what the scoop was. And the Northern Railroad Company ran the concessions in Glacier Park, Montana, and their headquarters were in St. Paul, so they hired St. Paul kids to go out and work the summer. And it was great. And I started out in the laundry, and I could really put sheets through those mangles fast. We had games, we had races, anything to break the monotony of working on those mangles. And then that year they let me, because they were short of help, become a waitress. And of course that's where you made your money. Because the dining rooms were very nice dining rooms with wonderful food. And I know the people that owned Frigidaire came out there. There were certain people that came out every year and had a room there for a month. Of course, if you got their tables, you were set,
But you said.
And we put our names on our tables and what college we went to. And I remember so often I was asked, how come Scandinavians at St. Catherine's College? And I finally came up with the answer that not all Scandinavians were stupid. I didn't know, I couldn't handle it, so
Right.
I threw it back at them, and they usually smiled and decided not to ask me that one again.
I'd like to shift gears for a moment and ask you about World War I and the Great Depression of the 1930s. I know we talked a little bit about it, but what impact, if any, did World War I have on your life and your family?
I don't remember World War I at all, no.
Okay.
See, that was 1918,
Right.
and that's 10 years before I was born.
How about the
The Depression, yes.
Yeah, how about the impact of the Depression?
Only from a standpoint is that I knew that we would invite people over for dinner to our house because my mother or father would say they don't have enough groceries, let's give them a good meal. But they were having a hard time. And one of those guys was in real estate, and of course nobody was buying real estate at the time of the Depression. Nobody had any money to buy anything, you know. So I do remember that. And I can remember, I was thinking, when I fix meat now for a family of, like Maggie's family, if I fix them a meal, I would never think one chicken would do it. One chicken fed 9 of us.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. And sometimes I got a wing, that would be my meat. And I can remember my dad at the head of the table buttering the bread, and then he could flip it right in front of you. Like that. Boom, boom, all the way around. And I sat next to my brother, Bill, and I was always going like this at him, or like this or something. So he got to have this reflex. And I do remember Connie was always ornery. And she would pick on Barbara and Marcia. And so Dorothy and I went and said if she picked on them anymore, she was going to be picking on us too. So leave them alone.
Did that stop it?
Mm-hmm. But she was born ornery, I think. She'd pass something. One time she passed me a piece of pie, and it landed in my lap. It fell off the plate. That's how hard she, swung it. And I picked it up to put it in her face. And everybody laughed, and I thought I was probably going to get killed.
That's great. So were you cognizant of the happenings that were taking place outside of St. Paul today with the advent of the internet, and you have instant notification in regards to what's going on around the world? Well, I mean,
no, I was
specifically related to the Depression.
Not to the Depression, more World War II.
Okay.
I certainly was, aware of all that was happening there, whether it was newsreels in the theaters, because they'd have some good news shows in the theaters with pictures, and the paper and the radio. And yes, I was. And then my 2 older sisters, Ellen and Marcia, went to New York and worked during the war. And it was funny because when I stayed a year in New York, and I walked around a block with a guy I was at a party with, because he needed to go for a walk because he probably shouldn't have anything more to drink, and we went into a restaurant, a bar, and the bartender looked at me and said, "Oh my God, an Evanson."
And you knew that from?
They lived upstairs.
They did?
Had lived upstairs.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
Well, Mom, let's get back to the subject of your education. What college did you attend? I know you talked a little bit about it.
Yeah, at St. Catherine's College in St. Paul. A very good all-girls school. Highly rated PhDs, et cetera, Phi Beta Kappas. Great teachers. Great campus. I was fortunate to be able to go there.
What did you study?
Before I went, I graduated from high school, and I just didn't have any idea. Nobody really asked me even what I wanted to do, so I just made an appointment with the dean at the college, and she said I should probably become a dietitian because I didn't want to go into nursing. I didn't want to I couldn't stand the thought of being a secretary from a standpoint I couldn't sit at a desk and do the same thing. Mm-hmm. And so I was telling her what my feelings were, because I'd had a lot of part-time jobs during the summer. And I'd worked in insurance buildings that had 15 floors. And I'd been a mail girl, and it was great. They wanted to give me another job at a desk, and I said, no, wait. It's at least as mail girl, you walked all over and you talked to everybody, and then you brought the mail back, you sorted it again, you did the whole thing again, and you were moving. So I didn't want any kind of a sedentary position, and I didn't want to go to college and get out and not have something to do. Mm-hmm. I really thought that I should be trained for something, so I became a dietitian, which at that time was a 5-year course.
Well, how did you do?
I did well.
You did well?
I did well.
And you graduated?
And I graduated, and in 4 years, mm-hmm. which I think is so strange these days. Kids go 6 years.
Excuse me.
But And then after that, I did get accepted for my internship, which was another year in the U.S. Public Health Service in New York City. And so I ended up going there. I wanted to go to New Orleans to Charity Hospital, and I got accepted there too, because you could apply to 3 places for your internship. And the Veterans Administration and the Public Health Service paid you. Every place else, either you paid or you got room and board and work. And I decided that I really didn't have a choice as long as I got accepted by the Public Health Service, because my parents had been supporting me for all these years, and I should make my own money.
So your parents paid for college?
Yes.
They did.
Mm-hmm. I worked some. I can't remember what they called us. You answered the phone and told people where things were, receptionist kind of thing. And for certain buildings, every building had somebody there to keep track of what was going on. And I'd do that maybe an hour, 3 hours a week or something, and that took some off the tuition, but not a lot.
Well, Mom, think back to an incident in college that you remember well. What was going on?
Well, the worst thing I did was I went into chemistry without having introductory chemistry, and I'd had no high school chemistry, and I passed. But I did not have good foundation.
Right.
And then when I wanted to go and take the course, they said you can't, because that's a prerequisite for the one you took. And I did the same thing in biology. As I should have taken biology, I went into anatomy, which sounded much more fun.
Right.
And biology was a prerequisite to anatomy. And so I kind of goofed myself up because I made it harder for me.
Right.
But in chemistry, one chemistry test, I was just sitting with my friend Miriam. We had sat in every other seat, and he gave us a comprehensive test. And I couldn't read the first question and understand it. So I said to Miriam, I'll race you to the end. I passed, she flunked, she had to take it over again.
I would say that somebody was on your side.
Listen, somebody's been on my side a lot. I should never have gotten into the Public Health Service internship.
Why is that?
There's only 14 kids a year that could go there, because they took 7 at July and 7 in September.
Right.
And it was had a commission, you were a second lieutenant, you had all the benefits of an officer as far as travel, etc., and the pay. And everybody there had a straight A average, but me.
Why do you think you got in?
Well, I had my friends all praying for me. I'd ask them when they'd come to school if they'd remembered their prayers the night before, because that was the only way I was going to get in. I was concerned about any of them, but I did get into 3, and I got into all 3. But my references were great. It wasn't my grades that were spectacular, but I had great references, because I was a worker.
Who are your best friends from this period of time, and do you still see any of them?
Yeah, Meme, still.
Still Meme?
Uh-huh.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And she's about the only one that I really keep in real close contact with. We still email each other occasionally, too. And whenever, as I say, I go up there, we always get together.
Well, who did you date during this period of your life, and what did y'all used to do on those dates?
And we used to mostly go to dances. In high school, St. Thomas was a boys' military school not too far from us, and they'd have a Friday night hop or something like that. And we were the sister school, and so we were invited as a school to come to this. So that was always Friday nights during school. But then we had our sorority dances and the fraternity dances. You know, everybody had something going on, probably 3 or 4. Occasionally, lots of times we went to movies. And I remember one of my first dates with a Jim Flynn from St. Luke's, even another school. And we went bowling, and he bowled 175, and I bowled 28. I didn't feel like gutter ball itself.
Right. Moving to World War II, how old were you again, and what were you doing during World War II?
Well, I was going to school.
What grade? Or
high school.
okay, you were in high school. Okay. I know you'd shared the story about.
Well, see that was Japan, was high school.
Okay.
No, I was in grade school. Because I can remember Pearl Harbor. We went to a movie down in Highland, and we walked home and went to Peggy Noonan's house. And when we walked in, they told us that Japan had bombed Pearl Harbor.
How did you feel? I mean, what was that like?
It was horrid. I'd seen too much on yeah, it was scary. Because we were losing. We lost for a long time. Japan kept coming closer and closer and taking over one island after another.
Right.
And we were losing. And then all of a sudden it started to go the other way. And of course, once the European was over, then those guys had to go fight the other war or finish off over there. And I was very grateful that we didn't have to invade Japan. I remember thinking that. As much as the atom bomb was a terrible bomb, I think if I were Truman, I'd do it today because of the lives that he saved.
What impact did World War II have on your life? What was, I guess, a real profound impact?
Well, in that my fear of war, and it's fear, it's not quite the right word, respect. That it's not a glorious, glamorous thing.
Moving to your adult life, when did you leave home? And under what circumstances?
Well, I went to New York for a year, and I spent 2 months of that year in Georgetown University Hospital in Washington, D.C. Excuse me.
Sure.
And then because my brother had died and my father had died and my grandfather had died, all on my mother's side, I decided I would stay home with her for a while. 2 younger brothers were going through some terrible times themselves, and she was having a hard time with them.
Terrible in what?
Louis, the second youngest, was never in good health. He had a hearing disability, and my mother would never think she wouldn't let him go to a different school, which probably he should have gone. But she would have nothing to do with that. She didn't want him different, but he was different because he couldn't hear, and by not being able to hear, he really couldn't talk as well. He didn't form the words. Okay. He had some terrible times. He married young, and then got divorced, had 5 children by that marriage, and then married another lady. And he died not too long, a couple of years ago. But he was in poor health. We used to say he enjoyed poor health because he would call us all the time, and it was the end. It was never going to be anything else. He just had a lot of mental problems to him. Sure, all of this didn't help. I always thought his second wife was a saint.
So you stayed at home for a couple of years?
I did. I wanted to go to Chicago and work. I started working at St. Joseph's Hospital and had a great time with Sister Rose Alma. She was the head of the department, and there were 3 or 4 of us dietitians, and the biggest thing I remember there is we kept wanting the cooks not to cook the meat the day ahead of time, especially like prime rib. They wanted to cook it ahead so they could cool it and slice it and then warm it up. And Sister kept saying, I don't know how we can do that. I said, tell the meat man when to bring the meat. So it didn't come till they could put it in the oven.
That wasn't an option.
It wasn't an option. But that's when I went into, I did do what they call clinical, which is the diet side of it. But I didn't like that. Back then, nutrition wasn't thought of very much. The doctors didn't pay any attention to it, certainly, and the doctor would put them on a diet, and people didn't pay any attention to it either, you know.
Right.
And but I found out I really liked the administrative side of it. So I left there and went to work for the state of Minnesota, and I went to work for a 1,000-bed mental hospital, which was still, always has been my most rewarding, where I could accomplish the most by doing the least, because anything was an improvement. Now, first time they got fresh oranges for breakfast, they all just about sang a song, you know. They were used to salt pork and grapefruit juice.
Mm.
You know what salt pork is?
No.
Well, it's a part of the fat from a pig. It's kind of like bacon, but not fattier.
Yeesh.
Ugh, I couldn't believe. But I had an assistant administrator that was very helpful. I was really young, and I had a good chef. And between the two of us, we got the money that we were supposed to have. And they'd tell me I was the bad guy, but that was okay. And so I'd tell the farmer, head farmer, your pigs get to be over 178 pounds, sell them to somebody else, we're not buying them. Because all we were buying was fat. Mm-hmm. And one time he brought 27 bushels of radishes. And I told him to take them back and plow them under, because I wasn't paying for those either.
What was his response?
No, of course he was furious. This little pit over there, who does she think she is, you know?
Right.
He was in, and the business manager were buddies, but I got to be buddies with the assistant business manager, and he was telling me where my money was going, that it shouldn't have been going, and so I would go and ask some questions and get it straightened around. And then the chef would take me out in the fields, and he'd show me what was growing and say, you can ask for this now. This is ready. But I didn't even, I didn't see anything grow, because they had farms. Mm-hmm. And most of the mental patients went out and worked on the farm.
Well, where have you lived during your adult life?
Well, I lived in St. Paul, and then New York, and then in the summer Montana, and then Sioux Falls, South Dakota, which is where I met your dad, and where we lived. And Maggie on up were born in Sioux Falls, and then we moved to Miami, and then we moved to Cleveland, Ohio, and then we moved to Baton Rouge.
What did you do between the time that you left home and you got married?
Well, I'd already met Murray, and we were considering marriage, and I decided that this long-distance courtship wasn't a good idea. So I went to Sioux Falls and got a job at Sioux Valley Hospital as a dietitian. And that
was your first job after you left home?
No, I worked at St. Joseph's and at the mental health hospital.
Gotcha,
and
okay.
then I went to Sioux Falls.
All right.
And worked there. And that was a nice hospital. It was about a 250-bed hospital. And my boss was kind of strange, but this is when I got to know all the nurses. I'd eat lunch with them, and I remember when I thought I was pregnant for the first time, I was trying to quiz them as to who was a good OBGYN. They'd say, oh, he's terrible, he's terrible, he's terrible. And finally somebody came up with, my mother had to go see Stallman, and I said, why him? Isn't he so terrible? Well, yeah, but he knows the most. Well, of course, that's where I went. I didn't care. I didn't need him to hold my hand. I just wanted somebody that could handle the situation. And so I stayed there, and then we got married. I came back and worked it, and got pregnant.
What about your career would you have liked to have done differently?
I probably would have gotten my master's. You could do an internship and get your master's at the same time, and I can remember one of the nuns saying that would be a good idea for me to do. And I was just tired of school, and I was glad to get out, and I would like to have had my master's. After your dad died, I went back to work, and right before he died, too. It was really. And I had a hard time getting a job because I'd been out for so long.
Right.
So I probably would have stayed more active in things. But I never thought I was ever going to go back to work again, right?
Sure.
You have 7 kids, you're not going to go back to work. You're going to stay home and take care of the kids.
Right.
But it didn't work out that way.
Moving to political views. The last time you voted in a presidential election, whom did you vote for and why?
Bush.
George W.
George W. I guess I'm more Republican than Democrat. So if I had a choice, and I thought I would go Republican because of the philosophy, so I did vote for Bush.
Are politics important to you?
Yes. Not in Louisiana. I can't take Louisiana seriously, though, because I got so frustrated when I first came down here because of the crime. You know, they elected somebody that was in jail. And, you know, I just couldn't believe people voted for people that they knew had done something wrong. And so I decided I just had to laugh, you know, or I'd go crazy trying to make sense out of how people voted in this crazy, crooked state of Louisiana politics.
Do you feel like we're getting better?
I hope so. I think so. I think it's a start. It's interesting that I have 2 grandchildren that went down to the legislative thing the other day, you know. Matthew went first, and he got a bill passed, and it was the teachers had to be tested. And Allison went, and hers was pay raises, but only for those that passed the test. And so, you know, she got that too.
What do you think about our new governor, Governor Blanco, the first?
So far, she's doing all right. She isn't who I voted for, but I don't have any big problem with her at all right now. I haven't seen that much to, you know. I think she's walking cautiously. Let's hope that the good old boys let her get something done.
Well, moving to your married life, what was Dad's full name? And when, where, and how did you meet him?
His full name was Murray Clifford. Wow.
It's been a couple years since you said it. So
Yes. And he was born in 1921 and died in 76. And he is the youngest of 3 children. He had an older brother, Alan, and a sister, Irma. And he never knew his father. His father left when he was 3. And he did see him once. He found out he was in a hospital. I thought in Phoenix, but I'm not positive about that. He went out to see him, just to see him, but never really.
That was Mason?
Mason was born in 84, and his mother's name was Ora, and she was born in 1912. And she remarried.
So let's make sure I'm getting the dates right. Ora was born in 1912. And when was Mason born?
1884.
1884. So there was a big difference.
They're big difference in age.
Big difference in age. That's interesting. Well, how did you meet Dad?
Well, my sister Marcia was in a terrible automobile accident, and it hurt her back. And her husband called and asked if I'd come and stay there for a couple weeks when she got out of the hospital. And that was when I was working for the state, and I had a lot of time accumulated, so I could do that. And he came to help see if there was anything he could do. And I had met him once before, but I didn't like him at all. And Marcia said, "We'll have Murray up." And I said, "Don't do it on my account."
Why didn't you like him at all?
I just, you know, nothing. I thought he was a conceited snob. Probably not snob, but he, you know, he just, I said we didn't click. And then he came back, and I saw another side of him. And so we started to date. And
where'd you go on your first date?
I don't remember. It was during the time that Marcia was convalescing, so it would have been a quick dinner someplace or something like that. You know, once Zach would get home, because she couldn't get around much without somebody being there.
Well, what was your courtship like with Dad?
Well, as I say, it was long distance for a while because I was still in St. Paul working, and then I came. And then most nights we'd go have dinner out someplace, and then I had a room at the Y because I didn't want to go buy a bunch of furniture and stuff. And he had his apartment. We didn't go to his apartment very much. We usually went out for dinner and went to the movies. And
in what city was this?
Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
A nice little town.
And how long after you met did you get married?
A year.
1 year.
A little bit over a year.
What would you say is the most important thing about choosing your husband? Or choosing a husband? Not specifically Dad, but just about choosing a husband.
Oh, there's lots of things to be considered, but I think certainly the spiritual side is very important. I think a Jew and a Christian would have a hard road. I don't think it's so bad now as it was back when my father wasn't a Catholic. And he was a Lutheran, but he didn't go to church. But he hated the Pope. Time magazine had come in with a picture of the Pope on it, and that magazine went down to the living room floor. And so I thought, I'm not ever going to do that.
And Dad was Catholic?
He became a Catholic before I met him, but he
did.
was raised a Baptist. And his mother would send him to church, but she wouldn't go. So he came home one time and said she wasn't going to send him either. And he met some people in Lancaster, Pennsylvania that were Episcopalians.
Yep.
And so he got kind of interested in that, and they suggested if he was looking, why didn't he look at the Catholic Church? Because that was the last hurrah. These were Episcopalians telling him that. So he was baptized into the Catholic Church in Sioux Falls, Father.
As an adult?
As an adult, before I met him.
Any other items that you could pass on in regards to choosing that spouse?
Well, it's so hard for me because I would not have picked any of my son-in-laws. And as they turned out, they're wonderful.
Right.
And so I guess you can't choose for anybody else.
Right.
And certainly there's all sorts of things to consider. You know, I think anybody that drinks too much is going to have a problem. If they're a gamble, they're going to have too much, they're going to have a problem. But if they don't gamble at all, they might not be much fun.
Right.
You know, I think certainly sex is important, but if it's all important, then that can be a problem for one. Sure. So I think anything in moderation, a little bit of all of it's good.
Right.
I think besides religion, I think finances often end up to be a problem in marriage. People have different ideas on how to spend or save their money. And activities, you know, if you don't have anything to do with each other.
Right.
Murray tried to learn how to play bridge. He promised me he would, but he was a lousy bridge player. He didn't ever like it.
In what ways has marriage turned out to be different than you expected?
It was harder.
It was hard. Why?
Because we didn't think alike. I was probably it was probably true when he told me I was black and white. There was no gray in my life, and I think he was probably right. I told Allison and Josh a story about how when we lived in Pilgrim Village, this was after you were born, and I got into a group called the Yoke Fellows, and it was a spiritual group, and you took the Minnesota multiphasic test and sent it off, and they sent you back little sheets every other week with something a trait that they found of yours in that test, and then gave you biblical readings to think about it. And one of them I got back was that I had infantile behavior pattern, not immature, infantile.
What did he say to that?
And Josh looked at me. Oh, I wasn't going to tell anybody because you didn't have to tell anybody. But I got to the meeting and I said, "Can you know what they sent me? I have infantile behavior pattern." But anyways, I did read and I studied and I asked God to help me. And when I would get angry, I would shut up. And so in finding this out about myself and my infantile behavior pattern, I then tried to address, come, not let it build,
Right.
but try to talk about it. And so it was probably some of my infantile behavior patterns. It didn't make it very easy for your dad either. As his favorite saying was, I was okay yesterday. What have I done today? So, but it was hard, and it was a lot of work.
Moving to children. When were your children born, and what are their names?
Well, now you're going to get some tears. You know that, don't you?
I do.
I feel it coming. Christopher was my firstborn, and he was born in 56, and he died in 60. And Leah was August of 58, and Mara August of 59, and Jill August of 60. So I missed one day of having 3 under 2. And then Maggie was born in 63, and Jamie was born in 65, and Peter was born in 68. And the older ones were all born in Sioux Falls. Jamie was born in Miami. And Peter was born in Cleveland.
Think back to the day that Christopher was born. What was the experience like for you?
Oh, it was wonderful. I could sleep on my stomach and have a cigarette. I remember telling the doctor, I'm going to go in and have a cigarette and roll over and go to sleep. And he said, "You're going to get sick." And I said, "No, I'm not." And I didn't.
And Christopher died of?
Aplastic anemia caused by a medication, chloramycin. The bone marrow just stopped making blood. That's now they do bone marrow transplants. Mm-hmm. And they told us then that it was coming, but it was too far away.
What are some special memories that you have of raising us?
Oh, it was fun. I don't have any terrible memories of some of the teenage years either. I had some of the kids had a tougher teen life than others, and maybe it probably had something to do with your dad's death. Mm-hmm. But I can remember, boy, we didn't have any cousins or anything, so we had to celebrate everything ourselves. And we'd have St. Patrick's Day, and we'd have all the decorations, and we'd have Valentine's Day and all the decorations, and of course birthdays and Christmas. The only time you were ever allowed to eat in the living room was when The Wizard of Oz was on during Christmas time, when they started that as a movie, and we'd have shrimp, and you kids didn't like it, and your dad and I were so glad. Eat the other stuff. You don't like that. That's fine.
It's a good thing.
Yes, that's good. If you want one, you can have it, but if you don't like it, that's all right. And so we had a big yard. The first house we had was just a great house. It was a little white house with a white picket fence with a little porch on the front and a big backyard. And we had a sand.
And where was that?
In Sioux Falls.
In Sioux Falls.
2118 South 1st Avenue. How's that? That's pulling it up. It was a really nice house for us. And then we went to Florida and lived in a house, but our final house there was one owned by Sophie's Tucker. If you don't know who Sophie Tucker was, she was come on up and see me sometime, baby. She was a New York star, singer, did clubs and stuff. And it had a big pool, and it had a bathroom off all the bedrooms. And when I was pregnant with Jamie, we were going to make this room off the dining room into a bedroom. And the kids walked in, one of your smart sisters, and said, "Where are you going to put the bathroom?" Because they didn't know you didn't have every bathroom.
Right.
Every bedroom had to have its own bathroom. And I said, "No, it doesn't always work that way." But Jamie was born on Halloween. And I can remember going to was set up the day before that I would go in because I had very fast deliveries and very easy ones, except for Peter, and I think that was the size of his head. And so the doctor met us there, and he told your dad to go get some breakfast. And before he got back, Jamie was born.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
What is the best thing about children? And then what is the most frustrating thing also?
Well, the best thing about them, you just can't help but just love them to pieces, you know? And they're so different. And well, if you can sit back and just enjoy that difference, it's wonderful. I think at first I tried to regulate them, well, this is the way, okay, this is the way you do it. But I think I found out the hard way that it wasn't probably going to be that way. And so their accomplishments and, some of the things they say and do and the questions they ask. And I've considered myself to be quite broad-minded, and it's not me, it's because of my children, because of what they taught me.
What about on the frustrating side?
When they didn't do what they were told. I don't know that even was so frustrating, because I guess I kind of took that to be part of growing up. When you saw that they were making a hard road for themselves, to still sit back and shut up.
Well, what is it like to be a grandparent?
It's wonderful to be a grandparent.
And how many grandchildren do you have now?
I have
This
11.
is a trick question.
I have 11. Jennifer, of course, was my first, and she was born in '85 and died in '03. That was a long one. And the rest of Maggie's kids are great. Josh is getting to be quite a young man. He got his guitar for his birthday. He paid for it himself. Nice new guitar. And he's very talented. He was born in '87. And Allison was one of the '90 babies. And Allison, too, has a strong music gift in that her band teacher says he'd like her clone because she can teach the other kids when he can't. And then there's Alex, who is a wonder as far as the way his mind works. And so she's got some good ones.
Moving to the rest of the grandkids.
Okay, well, of course there's there's Leslie, who was another '90 baby,
Right.
and Matthew, who was another '90 baby. And those three I'm taking to D.C., Washington for their 90 birthdays. And they're going to be joined. Kate and Zach are going to join us. Kate was born in '88. She's a little bit older. And Zach was born in '92. And they're coming to meet us there with their parents.
That'd be great.
And Leah and Chris, I guess, are coming too, which is going to be nice. Should have a good time. And then we've got your children. Austin, who was born in
97.
97.
That's right.
And Andrew was born in 99. And Lauren was born in 01. And I'm glad I don't have to take care of them, in that they've got so much energy. Mm-hmm. They wear me out. I love to take them one-on-one, but I watch them move and I just marvel. And I'm sure part of it's I'm 76. It would be a little hard for me to take over on taking care of little kids that little. The other ages, wouldn't bother me at all. And Austin would be easy, and Andrew wouldn't be very difficult. Lauren would be the one that would probably wear me out. But what a wonderful bunch of grandchildren. And then I've got a step-grandchild, Gabby, who is Paul's daughter. And she comes over with Jamie often, too.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, moving to travel, did you enjoy travel, and where have you gone?
Oh, I've done some marvelous traveling things in my life. I really enjoyed my time in New York, and that's where I got to love the theater. And I used to take the ferry. We lived on Staten Island, and I'd take the ferry over, and I'd buy a $1 magazine, and then I'd read it while I was going over on the ferry and up on the subway. And then on the way back, I'd trade it in on the other side for a cheaper model magazine. I'd say, can I switch this for this? And they'd say, yeah. And so I'd have a new magazine to take on the way home. That's how often I went back and forth to uptown New York. I loved New York City.
What's been your greatest adventure thus far in regards to travel?
I don't know. I think the one that I remember the most is the time I went to Athens and the Greek islands and Rome. Mm-hmm. Turned out to be kind of a spiritual thing, which I didn't expect at all. And I can't imagine what it would be like to go to the Holy Land. I really wished I could have gone there. But I had a wonderful trip to Ireland this year. We spent 2 weeks there with a nice group of people. It was a church tour, and it was very nice. And then Lee and I had a wonderful trip to Central Europe and the cruising down the Danube and seeing all those sights. And the Czech Republic, I think, Prague was probably the prettiest of cities, and quite different. But it was so strange because I try to bring different gifts back, not too many, but some, and crosses are always kind of nice, you know. I couldn't find one in Prague, any place. And the communists have been there for 40 years.
Right. And
there were no crosses to be held. And then, of course, one time when I went to Vancouver and took the train ride across into Banff and Lake Louise, that was a beautiful thing. That was lovely. So I've had some good trips. Enjoyed my time even in Florida. I remember going to Florida the first couple of times, Destin. We used to go when you kids were little to the East Coast a lot. But
Cape Cod and Bethany Beach.
Bethany Beach, and we went to Annapolis, and we went to Williamsburg, and that was the part of the country your dad just loved. And so when he wanted to go on vacation, that's where we went. So I've had some good vacations.
Well, what are your interests and hobbies, and what do you like to do for fun?
Well, I love to go out and eat for fun. My hobbies are many. I needlepoint a lot. I'm into knitting, these funky scarves.
Very cool.
And now I'm knitting a purse that I'm going to take and throw in a washing machine with hot water. It's called felting, and it'll come out feeling like felt. So we'll see how that one works out. And I paint a little bit. I've done watercolors, oils, and acrylics. And I'm not really good, but it's a nice breakaway, and it's fun people to be with.
Well, what organizations do you belong to?
Well, besides the church, I belong to the Guild, for the Needlepoint Guild. Mm-hmm. In fact, I had one of my pieces on display at the library needlepoint pieces, and one of my pillows is on display at the needlepoint shop now. So that pillow is the one with the 5 dancing girls.
That's right.
Yeah. So I do it. We every Thursday we get together in needlepoint and have something to eat, and we have other different outings here and there. But I've also recently joined the Red Hat Society.
The Mad Hatters?
No, it's not the Mad Hatters. It's a Red Hat Society. And it'll be a group of us that'll put on our purple outfits and our red hats and go out and eat and go to the movies and go to plays and go do some other little things like that. Next year I want to go to the symphony, I think. I'd like that.
Well, Mom, I'd like you to take stock for a moment. At this point in time, has your life turned out as you imagined that it would?
No. When I always had a plan. And I finally got tired of writing the book and rewriting the book and rewriting the book because nothing ever turned out the way I had it planned. So I finally have gotten smart enough to give up on writing the book, so I just kind of take it for today. But it's certainly, I expected to live in this white picket fenced house, you know, have kids and have them go to school and have them be all A students with great achievements, and which many of them have, and they're all going to have great achievements in one way or another.
Right.
But I certainly wasn't the way I probably, if I had anything to do over again, I probably would not move to Baton Rouge. At the time, we even checked on the economy down here, and I was advised that this would be a perfect place because of the gas and oil, that it would never dry up down here. Well,
sure.
Hasn't the way it's turned out. It's a hard city to bring because of education and opportunities. So my preference would be to not have done that, but I don't know. You know, that's just hindsight.
Well, would that fall into my next question, which is, what has been your greatest disappointment or frustration?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
What's the most important thing in your life right now?
Oh, certainly my children, my grandchildren.
And what would you have done differently in your life if you knew then what you know now?
Oh, I don't know.
Well, is there something that you would have done differently?
I don't think so. I can't imagine things being different. No. No, I can't think of anything that... I can't think of a good answer to that question.
Well, what are your goals right now, and what do you hope to accomplish next?
Well, I hope my knees gets fixed. I'm getting some shots for them. I've only had 2, and I thought I had a miraculous cure after the second one, and the next day I found out I wasn't cured yet, but maybe next time. And I'm still, you know, been really good at working out in the last couple weeks because of all this stuff, so I've got to get back to do that because I like the physical activity. And I am involved in church activities, which I appreciate, and the opportunity, and also to have the time to do that, because there was so much of the time that when you kids were growing up, I remember going to Father Trivison and saying, you know, I should help in the church some way, and he said, just go home and raise your kids.
Right.
You know, don't worry about us. Go home and raise your kids. You got enough to do there. So I did. I had plenty to do. So I'm glad I've got that opportunity now to do some of those things that can help the church and the people in the church and bring me a little closer to God.
If you could do anything you wanted to do, what would you do?
Buy a condo in Destin.
Really? Move there, or just to commute back and forth?
Back and forth.
Well, what do you think will be the major world events during the next 10 years?
I guess seeing China come to life. And hopefully the Middle East will quiet down within the next 10 years. I don't know how that's ever going to happen. But I think we're just beginning to feel the effects of such a big country becoming more capitalistic than it was. And I think that there'll be less and less. I think it'll be less country and more universe and more world. It won't be the United States, it'll be the world that'll be important, not the country. I'd like to see that.
What are the most important things that you have learned about life thus far?
I don't have a good answer for that either. I guess acceptance of people, pretty much where they are, and God's love, and don't make too many plans.
Is that kind of your philosophy of life? Because that's really my
so.
next question was, what is your philosophy of life? Well, what role does religion play in your life?
Big role.
Big.
Always has. Marcia she'd chaperone us when we'd go to these lakes, and we'd get up and go to Mass, and she'd say, you guys should be chaperoning me. She couldn't believe that this group of people, I really had a very close-knit, very spiritual group.
Well, when you die, what's going to happen to you?
I'm going to go to heaven.
And why do you believe this will happen?
Because Jesus died so that he could take me.
It's a special week right now, isn't it? Well, do you have a favorite Bible verse or a hymn?
I have a favorite thing I try to remember is when I get worried, take away my fear.
And why is that your favorite? Just because it comforts you? Well, if your children or grandchildren could remember just one thing about you, what would you like them to remember?
That I was proud of them and I loved them.
Well, Mom, we're nearing the end of the interview. The next part is about advice that you have for the future generations of your family. First, what advice do you have for your great-grandchildren in the area of getting an education?
Oh, it's hard to imagine what education is going to be like for them, great-grandchildren. I guess it'll all be a tech stuff, pretty much. And I guess my advice would be, study hard, but learn how to have a good time, too.
What about choosing a career?
I think that's most important, but if you do choose the wrong one, you can always change it. And I would certainly think that could be applied to anybody,
Well, what advice do you have about money?
And just don't spend more than what you make.
What about love and marriage?
Give it all you have, Really work at it.
And how?
In the long run, it's worth it. It'll pay off.
How should they raise their children?
Like I did mine. No. With discipline. I think we lack so much of that today. And respect for parents and adults. The children have that respect.
Well, Mom, probably all of the future generations of our family will watch this tape. Since you have the opportunity right now, what personal message would you like to give to them?
That I will pray for them.
Mom, we're at the end of the interview. Is there anything you would like to add or say to complete things? Please take as much time as you would like.
I don't think so. I don't think I have anything more.
Well, I would like to say, on behalf of your children, how much we love you and how much we respect the hard work and the opportunity that you've given us. And I pray to God every day for you. And I thank you.